Insurance Committee. My name is Senator Mike Jacobson. I represent the 42nd Legislative District.
was going to be a major water reservoir. It was going to have an 880 corridor. And it was going to have an international airport. When he was defeated in 1971 by Governor Exum, that international airport went to Kansas City as part of the 435 loop right now. You notice that the development between Lincoln and Omaha is not proceeded like Governor Tiemann had visioned. We have an opportunity, I believe, in the state of Nebraska. We're never going to have mountains and we're never going to have a beach. But we do have an opportunity with the location we have in this state. And you look at where we're located, east, west, north, south in our country, and something that we have that others don't, we have the people that want to work. Now, if we put those together, and you can talk about in the past projects that didn't come here, industries that didn't come here, possibly based on the idea that we weren't ready. Well, we want to be ready. And if we do things differently going forward, and you look at possibly the discussion that Toyota had about locating here years ago. And I've talked to people that were involved in that on the education side. If you look at where Metro Community College is today compared to where they were at that moment in time, and being able to train people and having this site, again, no one has a crystal ball, but having this site in place, we possibly could have that kind of company here in our state. I'm going to be here to close, and I've got a number of other things to add, but I do believe we have an opportunity to make a difference long-term, as Governor Tiemann was envisioning in 1969, and do something that can really make a difference for our state. And instead of actually looking at our state as what we don't have, let's concentrate on what we do have, and let's get the landing area ready for those businesses to land here and make a difference for the future of our state.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. We'll now open up LB 644 for proponent testimony. Welcome.
Hello, glad to be here. Good afternoon, Senator Slama and the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. I'm Lucas Freschel, LUCAS-FROESCHL. I'm Director of Fall City Edge, Economic Development and Growth Enterprise. We support LB 644 for funding of rural mega sites in Nebraska. In the work we've done in our community, Fall City Edge knows that a key part of economic development has to do with securing and improving physical sites. We have secured options on over 1,000 acres along the Union Pacific Rail Line south of town, and in partnership with OPPD and Olson, we're close to finalizing a master plan for development. The additional investment into the site and building fund proposed in LB 644 will be key for Fall City to acquire land, invest in utility infrastructure, access the site, build rail spurs, and begin construction. Last year, I testified on behalf of Senator Slama's priority bill, LB 977, for a city of the second class that partners with public power to secure redundant and resilient access to power. Given our location at the end of a transmission line, the need for this was noted to develop the megasite. The bill passed unanimously through committee and then through the legislative floor with 0 nay votes, signaling a unified legislative effort to invest in higher paying jobs that attract families and workforce to our state. This bill is another key piece to increasing resources for projects like this across the state. Although one focus of this bill is to develop a multi-metro mega site, it's encouraging and respectful that LB 644 also includes $50 million of additional investment into the state's existing site and building fund, which is already being utilized by rural communities across the state. Fall City has continued to lose citizens since the Missouri Pacific Railroad ceased local operations in 1990. The average median income has suffered, and according to the Nebraska Department of Education, 53.1% of our kids in the public school district receive free or reduced rate lunches, top 1/5 in the state. Reversing this trend is realistic with access to higher paying jobs, and higher paying jobs are accessible with a rail served mega site like we're working to develop in Fall City. Not all the data is discouraging. According to a 2022 workforce job concentration and commuter study, Richardson County has 2,987 jobs, 4,373 laborers. That means 1,386 of our working county residents are commuting elsewhere for employment. We have the workforce, but a percentage of them are likely traveling south into Kansas and east into Missouri for higher pay. Sabetha, Kansas is the gold standard for rural industry in our region, and many of our citizens are commuting there for work. I kindly ask that you support this piece of funding for development both inside and outside the metro corridor. With 4.2 million people living within 100 miles of Falls City, there's no other city in the state with access to a larger population within that radius. With our access to the Kansas City industrial market, progress we've made on development of Nebraska's premier megasite, and equidistant location between KC, Omaha, and Lincoln, Falls City is poised to be the return on investment Nebraska is looking for.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Frischel. And thank you
Oh, I said.
please be seated. Yes. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Cal.
Thank you, Senator Sana. Can you tell me, what does a mega site look like? It sounds very impressive, but what is involved?
Yeah,
Businesses
so
or companies?
I suppose so. So to be defined as a mega site, Olson has given us some guidelines. You got to have access to rail. You got to have at least 800 acres of developable land. It's going to take major investment to try to get a gas line to the site. Our current sanitary sewer system in Falls City cannot, keep up with the capacity that would be warranted. There's going to be obviously roads to build to the site, and we're trying to prepare this site so that when they want to come, we're prepared to say, yes, we can do this within 18 months.
So when you say they, who is they?
So Falls City, we've only got 4,000 people. So we're not going to be able to attract Tesla or Ford, but we think we positioned ourselves as an agriculture and trying to target that industry. So soybean crushing, or, maybe some sort of logistical transportation of the corn harvest, down to Texas for feed. A local grain handling facility built there 10 years ago, and they're looking to expand because of the amount of investment they've been able to capture with our agriculture community.
Okay, so, and is that the whole site would be just one company, or are there multiple companies that you're trying to put on this
So
site?
there's multiple buildable sites. On the second page of that handout there, we've kind of identified, one spot's got 300 acres, one spot's got 70 acres, one spot's got, maybe a couple hundred acres. And so, eventually throughout time, there could be 4 to 5 up to, 10 buildable sites for different companies.
And then, so what would the eventual return on investment be for a site like this, and over what time period?
So I don't know if I can articulate exactly that answer, but I think as far as locally, my job is to try to increase value, tax revenue for the citizens of Falls City. And the immediate return on investment locally, just with the ancillary investments that come from one business, and then their raw materials could create another business within the site, and then it all feeds into that one unit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Are there any other questions? Yes, Senator Von Gillern.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I've driven Highway 75 more times than I'd like to count. It's not the most fun drive in the world. How far, remind me, how far is Falls City from I-29?
So we're about, I think it's 23 or 24 miles from I-29.
Okay, all right. Seems like location or proximity to an interstate would be pretty critical. Are you not seeing it that way?
I am seeing it that way. You're right. And I would wonder if 23 miles could probably be considered close enough to the interstate for logistical convenience.
You got rail access, which is a whole different story, but anyway, thank you.
Just to build on that, Mr. Frischel, isn't it true that Falls City and this mega site is uniquely positioned between Highway 75 and Highway 73?
Yeah. So Falls City's on Highway 73, a good maybe 5 to 8 miles from Highway 75.
Thank you. Senator Jacobson.
I guess maybe just to clarify, you're testifying here because this is a potential mega site for this fund. But maybe to be clear, I think the bill is really dealing with funding to DED to fund sites that would be selected based upon what criteria? Do you know what the criteria would be?
So I asked that question this morning in our meeting, and I said, I asked, is this just specifically for mega sites? And I think the answer I got was no. Although we qualify as a mega site right now, I think it could be available for anyone that's trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
But to be clear, the bill itself is really for statewide to really develop mega sites, and I happen to know one that's pretty close, right spot in the middle of my district.
Right.
North Platte, that's got a rail site, and it does have interstate, and has UP Rail. And I guess one follow-up question, I assume on your mega site, and this would all come out and on down the line, but is this all land that would be voluntarily for sale? Would you be looking at doing eminent domain, or how would you go about
So-
acquiring that?
Right now, we have two landowners. One is about 800 plus acres. The other one is 148 acres. They both have Fall City ties. They're both, we've got them secured right now through 2025, and the other one on 2028. Had a conversation on Friday to get those extended through 2034. They seem willing to negotiate, but all this site is under option, and we have the option to purchase it at $25,000 an acre.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freschel. Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Freschel.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello, Mary Burley, Maryberlie, and I am representing the Grand Island Area Economic Development Corporation, but am handing out a letter of support from North Platte Economic Development and our partners just to the west of us. I'm here in support of LB 644 as it relates to increased state investments in community efforts to create large industrial parks, upgrade and extend utilities, and partnerships that spur new capital investment into communities. The additional $50 million to the Sites and Buildings Development Fund currently run by the DED is an important part of LB 644, and it's the reason I wanted to testify with you today. The Cornhusker Army Ammunition Plant in Grand Island was built in 1942. The 19 square mile campus manufactured heavy ammunitions, bombs, and chemical compounds. At the time, this facility was a state-of-the-art and arguably provided Central Nebraska with the largest economic boom in our history. When the Army decommissioned the ammunition plant in 1989, Grand Island and Hall County went to work remediating the campus. Tens of millions of dollars were spent to correct intense soil and water contamination that spread throughout the 5 bomb lines and 2 ammunition magazine areas. 645 dilapidated buildings were demolished, and millions of pounds of concrete was removed. By the time Cornhusker was considered a suitable brownfield site, funds had simply run out for basic utility expansion and rail upgrades. Today, there's 23 miles of 90-pound rail that still exist at Cornhusker and are sandwiched between Burlington Northern Santa Fe, running along the north edge of the campus, and Union Pacific Railroad along the southern border. These 1,200 acres have been declared blighted and substandard, and on paper are ripe for development. I say on paper because there is a significant financial gap when recruiting businesses to the Cornhusker industrial area in Grand Island. City water, wastewater, and fiber stop 3 miles short east of the campus. The financial needs of the projects this large frequently require assistance from the state, and often costs are just too prohibitive to make capital improvements that are required to start development. Today, over 600 people are employed at businesses in the Cornhusker Industrial Park area. These industries and employees rely on septic tanks, wells, and leach fields to operate their businesses. While these water sources are questionably efficient for today, our future growth in Nebraska is capped. Grand Island has been fortunate to leverage Nebraska Sites and Buildings Development Fund 4 times. The first was in 2012, and again in 15, 17, and 21. These funds were very much appreciated by Grand Island, and on average only accounted for 0.0048% of the total project. The Sites and Buildings Development Fund is an incredibly competitive process and currently lacks adequate dollars to make significant impacts in Nebraska's economic base. Additional dollars to the Sites and Buildings Development Fund would help Grand Island as well as all other communities across the state. Thank you for your time, and I ask that you support 644.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burley. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Ballard.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. Hey, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
When you're making your marketing pitch to these companies, what are their major concerns and their major pros of coming to Hall County and Grand Island?
So certainly industries are looking for population density. They're looking for those population centers, and we're able to pull that labor shed because Nebraska is a very commutable state. So we're able to pull those labor shed dollars. But utilities is a huge obstacle that we face specifically at the Cornhusker campus. Like I said, those utilities stop 3 miles short east at city limits to that park. And it's arguably used to be $1 million a mile. And it's just much, much more than that now.
Perfect. Thank you.
right, Senator Jacobson.
Well, first of all, thank you for your testimony today, and also congratulations to Grand Island being, you're the third metro area in the state of Nebraska, and so it's great to see that growth of our state moving west. And Grand Island's really been a shining example of really developing not only all your air service, but really what you're doing to really grow that population base in what really is central Nebraska. So I guess one question I'm just curious about your site. And I'm just looking in terms of funding, what it could all be used for. Where are you at contamination wise with your site? Are you good to go there, or is that?
That has all been remediated
Okay.
today. Yep.
So really the only impediment now is really to get water and fiber really to your site. and
City
you should
water,
be-
city sewer, fiber optics, and natural gas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Von Gillern.
Just to add on to that, the city water, your current infrastructure in the city has the capacity to handle that then?
They do.
Additional loads?
Yep,
Okay.
they do. The city of Grand Island has overbuilt for capacity for some time. Of course, there's some logistics associated with maybe a lift station, depending on what industries are located out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillern. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chairman Sloma.
Good afternoon.
The Banking Committee. My name is John Mueller, JOHNMUELLER. I'm here to represent Cass County Economic Development. Currently serve on the executive board there, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to be in favor of LB 644 and thank Senator McDonald for introducing it. I've served in various leadership roles. I was mayor for 8 years of Louisville. I served on the city council for 12 years, and I currently serve on the Cass County Planning and Zoning as the chairperson. Through this, in my role in economic development, I see major opportunities to attract new businesses, new industries to our county, this transformational type of projects that can benefit an entire state, region, Cass County, and surrounding communities. We're positioned in a great area between two metro areas, and think we can move significantly needs to move this thinking forward. We need to prepare the plan for strategic growth, key technology-related industries, work close with partnerships and chambers, with the chamber, the state, and municipalities to take advantage of the major district direction and indirect economic benefits this legislation can have. Our economic development organization has been actively involved in other projects. Most of the time we run into, these are high-paying jobs with billion-dollar investments, but we don't have the quick turnaround that you've mentioned to have the land available. This would kind of work together to mend those fences and bring everybody together on one page and be able to offer these. We lost out on a Panasonic project for some battery components down in Kansas City. It's just an example. They were ahead of us. They were ready. So we need to have this site fund, development fund to compete with those. I also am president of Pinko Bank in Louisville, and I fully understand the fiscal responsibility that LB 644 has, but I feel it's an important investment in the state. You look back at how the government has affected population growth. We were 1 million people in 1890 in Nebraska. Part of that's just due to the Homestead Exemption Act. People were able to come out and get 80 acres. The other part of it was Union Pacific Railroad and their investment in the Omaha area and the state and how that's grown. I think these are just two additional investments that our state provides. This bill would generate an investment and allow states to retain its talent. We'll keep our young people in the state, and I think it will provide both economic and population growth to our state. The time is now for Nebraska to invest in preparation and planning, ultimately see the substantial return on investment this will bring in the years to come, generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming to testify today. I'd invite any proponents or any opponents to come along the front row just to get lined up, because we do have, I think, a lot of people to come here and testify today. So thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Chair Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Tim O'Brien, TIMO''BRIN. I'm the Director of Economic Development and External Relations for the Omaha Public Power District, and I'm also here representing the Nebraska Economic Developers Association. I really thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of LB 644. I started my career in economic development at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, or DED. I had the privilege of being part of several program and policy areas, including the Site and Building Development Fund, which this bill is focused around. The program was created by a recommendation from a statewide strategic development assessment in 2011. The original recommendation was to include 10 to 20 million per year in the Site and Building Development Fund. Today, the fund operates with significantly less than that amount. I believe it's a little over $2 million a year. My comments today will be more focused in two areas: opportunity and lessons learned. First, on opportunities. Economic developers are fielding a significant amount of activity, as other testifiers have mentioned or will mention shortly. I asked my friends at the Department of Economic Development to quantify this more, preparing my testimony. They stated that there's more than $15 billion in projects in the pipeline they've been having discussions with. These projects are diverse, from battery manufacturing, technology, biotech, projects related to ag processing, IT, energy-related items from hydrogen to renewables to biofuels. This may be the largest pipeline of activity in terms of capital investment they've seen, and certainly in my 15-plus years in economic development. It's important to note we're fielding smaller projects as well than previous years. While the size of projects is on a larger scale with capital investment well over $200 million each, that's doubled since the pandemic when things were under $100 million. There's been a clear uptick in large mega projects that are capital intensive and yield numbers of jobs and huge investment into our state. So what all does that mean? We've learned some lessons. The Site and Building Development Fund and associated programs are critical for continued strategic investments in our state. The legislature has acknowledged the Site and Building Fund is a good fund and trustworthy to allocate dollars. Businesses want site and utility certainty and collaboration with state and local officials. I'll give you two examples in that regard. One, in Sarpy County, there are many businesses lost, and due to sites not being planned or ready. We learned quickly a full collaborative effort between economic development, cities, counties, utilities has yielded billions in investment and hundreds of new jobs in a tech advanced sector. Another example is in Blair and Washington County, where we continue to experience clustered growth in agriculture and biotechnology. Site development, planning, utilities have all been pivotal to this growth. I've learned that continued strategic investments, planning, and infrastructure will help business growth in Nebraska as we compete on a global scale. LB 644 has the opportunity to transform the state. We need to invest the resources now as the preparation and planning takes a significant amount of time. I look forward to the impactful benefits and opportunities this will bring to my three children. Two are currently in the elementary school in Ashland, and one will be joining next year and future generations to come. Thanks for considering my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today. All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. I'm Jason Ball, President and CEO of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce and Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development, and that is JASONBALL. I also appear today on behalf of the Greater Omaha Chamber and Nebraska State Chamber, all of whom are in support of LB 644. The size and capital investment of large economic development projects has increased massively in the past decade. Such projects bring high-wage jobs with benefits, create inflows of talent, invest significantly within the communities that are selected, both through their facilities and in the civic institutions of those communities. So competition between states for these projects is greater now than it's ever been. Site selection is not just a consideration of tax environment, although that is important. Speed and cost of site access is often the determinative factor for business. States that have invested in mega site preparation will be much more competitive than those that have not. We have a unique opportunity to establish a mega site on the I-80 corridor in between Lincoln and Omaha through this bill. In doing so, we'll leverage access to our national transportation infrastructure, telecommunications fiber, world-class post-secondary education programs, and the largest unified talent pool within the state with more than 1.3 million in population within a 60-minute driving distance. The Lincoln and Omaha chambers have executed an MOU to formalize our intentions to collaboratively pursue such a development. I've practiced economic development in 4 states and have seen what assets like this can do. Just 2 examples of note. The 800-acre Foundation Park in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, has become a hub for modern logistics suppliers, including Nordica Warehouses, CJ Foods, Schwann's, and Dakota Carriers, among many others, employing hundreds in that community. The city of Taylor, Texas, which assembled a more than 1,000-acre site, is going to become home to a $17 billion Phase 1 investment by Samsung Semiconductor, and they have already added another 800-acre site for the Taylor Rail Park right adjacent to it. Economic development consultant Jay Garner often says, no product, no project. And it is just that simple. We know there are projects that Nebraska cannot compete for with the sites and access to talent that we provide as a state currently. Through an investment like LB 644, you have the opportunity to choose to make an investment that will make Nebraska an option for new business and compete with other states. There is no reason that Nebraska can't be in consideration for projects that other states are bringing to their communities. LB 644 gives Nebraska the financial ability to complete proactive investments in site readiness that are now a requirement to compete for major projects. This bill enables the necessary funding mechanisms to provide a real opportunity for transformational economic development in Nebraska. The Lincoln, Omaha, and state chambers respectfully request your support, and I would be thrilled to answer any questions you may have for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Cal.
Thank you, Senator Solomon. What would the time frame be from bill passing to companies there and hiring? I mean, I'm guessing it's a decade at least, but.
Senator, thank you for your question. I would suggest that we could get there sooner than that. While I want to acknowledge my colleagues that have testified before me today, their communities are a little bit further down the road. They have acquired site access and have done some initial site preparation work. This is a comparatively new effort between the Lincoln and Omaha communities. We are in active assessment right now of potential sites and have narrowed it down. Actually passed our first round into a more final round of sites under consideration. We would then need to go through the site acquisition process. And so we do have a longer way to go. I do hope from bill passage, we could get there much, much sooner than 10 years.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. Oh,
I do have a
Senator
question.
Ballard.
I'm sorry. So thank you for being here, Mr. Ball. And then from your testimony, you said you highlighted a few other neighboring states that have done something similar. Are there other states that have used, especially this new round of funding to create mega sites?
Senator, that's a great question. And while I don't know if I can point to specific examples under the new round of funding, I can tell you it's been common practice in economic development for several years to gain control of site access and then proactively put in infrastructure development. I used one example from Texas when I was there. The Dallas-Fort Worth corridor is another great example where cities and municipalities have been doing that, not just for years, but decades in that area. I would funding that other communities to use those resources in that way. Does that answer your question?
That does.
Senator?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Ball. Is there any additional testimony for LB 644? Any opposition testimony for LB 644? Seeing none, any neutral testimony? Seeing none, Senator McDonald, you're welcome to close. For the record, there are no letters for the record on this bill.
Thank you. Try to clarify a couple things during the discussion we had on this, and you're talking about a mega site, about 100 million for a mega site, 50 million for the site, current site development program. We're having discussions and we're talking about the idea of, okay, what's other states doing? And you start looking at, we always like to talk about the 6 states around us. And I go, no, I want to know what the other 49 states are doing. I want to know what kind of sites they're putting together, who we're competing against. And at one point, one of the subject matter experts in the room said, well, you're here in different states. Some are saying they want, they're setting aside 2,500 acres. I go, well, then we should be 2,500 acres plus one. That should be our approach. And you talk about us as a state and everything we have to offer. Well, if we were running the Nebraska football team and we said, you know what, next year, I think we could be in the top 30, maybe 28th. And then we would right away fire that coach. But the idea that all of a sudden then a new coach comes in and says, okay, I think we can get you in the top 10 and possibly compete next number of years for being number one. But when I bring recruits in here, you guys don't have the stadium we need. You guys don't have the training program. There's things you can do to recruit people. That's the same thing we can do with business. We just don't approach it that way. We don't want to, I'm not asking you to spend money. I'm asking you to invest money. And the odds are we are going to have a great return on that money. It's not guaranteed. There's nothing guaranteed in life. But if we do certain things and put things in place, we can be competitive. But if we continue to approach our state the way we have, we basically have a population shift coming from the west to the east. We're like a lifeboat. We're not growing. We're maintaining our population. And we're all going to shift to the one side of the lifeboat. We're going to tip and we're all going to drown. We're not making the improvements. We're not looking forward and having that approach as we do with building a football team, which is a game. This is going to make a difference in people's lives if we're looking at investing that money from the cash reserve, and not only for the current program, but for that mega site. For that the idea to say, yeah, we want somebody to come in and match capital with 250 million. We want 250 plus employees. We want to be competitive. We want to have we know we have the people, we have to get them trained, and we have to have the site ready for that business to land here. But right now we can't even recruit because we're like telling the kid that there's not even a football stadium or a training program for them to be able to at least be competitive with wanting to come here to our state right now. And we know that it's gone on for years and we've never addressed it. We have an opportunity financially to address it right now.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. For the record, I would say the Nebraska program would wait 5 years before firing that coach. Any questions for Senator McDonald? See none. Thank you very much. Oh, absolutely. All right, that closes out the hearing for LB 644. We'll now open the hearing for LB 621. Long time no see, Senator McDonald.
Thank you. Thanks.
And if you are planning to be a proponent on this bill, I do appreciate those who have come to the front row to testify. Please make your way up to the front row as well, just to expedite things.
Thank you, Chairperson Slama. Thank you for members of the committee for being here. My name is Mike McDonald, MIKEMCDONNELL, represent Legislative District 5, South Omaha. I'm introducing LB 621. The bill seeks to amend the Site and Building Development Act, which directs the Department of Economic Development to finance loans, grants, subsidies, credit enhancements, and other financial assistance for industrial site and building development. LB 621 adds a section to the Site and Building Development Act that would include grants to governmental subdivisions and Nebraska nonprofit organizations to improve building and infrastructure and construct an outdoor soccer stadium with a capacity of no more than 10,000 seats within the boundaries of a metropolitan class city to qualified grants under the Site and Building Development Act in the area with immediately adjacent to the federally qualified census tract. Governmental subdivisions and Nebraska nonprofit organizations are eligible to receive assistance under this new provisions of the Site and Building Development Act. Applicants for a grant for development of a stadium shall provide Director of Economic Development, with a letter of support from the mayor of the metropolitan class city in which the stadium is to be located, a letter of support from the team that is to be the primary tenant of the stadium, and proof of the availability of $25 million in private or other funds for the facility. A grant issued under this subsection shall not exceed $50 million. This bill is a part of two bills that I have brought at the request of Union Omaha. Omaha and Nebraska's only professional soccer team. The second bill, LB 622, is in the Revenue Committee, and it would amend the Sports Arena Facilities Financing Act to allow the projects like this to receive turn-back financing. I will be followed in testimony today by Marty Cordura, the president of Union Omaha, and Steve Swanstrom, president and CEO of Centrist Federal Credit Union. But a couple of points that I want to make are the following. First, the Union Omaha has been examining a host of sites in and around the Omaha area for the last 2 years for the potential construction of a home stadium for their team. They currently play at Warner Park, and while that has worked, it is difficult for them to play professional soccer games while trying to simultaneously host professional baseball in the same stadium. Second, this request was part of the significant number of requests that were made as part of LB 1024 process. I found this project intriguing and one that would have a significant economic impact on the city of Omaha and the area in and around the Millwork Commons, Gallup area north of the CHI Center. Furthermore, I view this as a standard of living bill. That what I mean is by that is when folks are talking or looking at moving to Nebraska, a professional sports team, particularly soccer, is something that many young people are attracted to. It is something to enjoy and be proud of in our state. Third, the economic impact that a $100 million project will transform the area of North Omaha. In 2021, Union Omaha commissioned an economic impact study from the best in class convention, sports, and leisure. This report projected $99 million in economic impact for the state of Nebraska. In addition to the projected impact to the city of $168 million, the report also projected 225 net new construction jobs and 195 net new jobs from stadium operations. As Union Omaha's request, CSL also measured the economic impacts for the auxiliary development surrounding the stadium. The first phase of private development is expected to create over 450 net new jobs with just under 200 million in projected economic impact. As I mentioned in the opening, that we had 367 projects come to the North and South Omaha Economic Recovery Act, and this was one of them that did stand out. And as you see going forward, it is not being recommended at this time, at least right now with what we've had discussions with Olson and our committee. But knowing the importance of it, and I'm not a soccer fan. I played soccer. I attended soccer games because my son, when he was young, played soccer. I don't care if it's soccer. I don't care if it's hockey. I don't care if it's football. I don't care what it is. The point is, it's about the economic impact. It's about what people want, and it's about trying to get people to retain and recruit younger people for our state. And again, it's an investment. If we're looking at the return on that investment and where we are in Omaha, and there's already been some discussions with people on this committee about this bill that I've had, and looking at, okay, can we partner possibly with someone else? Can we look at, multi-use for that stadium? Yes, I'm open to all ideas based on the idea of trying to improve this legislation, but I do think it's important, and it did stand out during that process we went through with LB 1024, and the people behind me here that are testify are very passionate about this development, and I agree with them that it can make a difference to our state, and especially in the Omaha and North Omaha area.
Thank you, Senator McDonald.
I'll
Are
be
there
here to
any
close.
questions from yes, Senator Cal?
Can you tell me, so this came up as part of the North Omaha projects?
367 projects came up to the North and South Omaha projects at approximately $2.2 billion.
So this one was not something that they chose for that, for the ARPA funds for that, correct?
Put it this way, there's things that have been ranked, and there's ways trying to spend that money as effectively and efficiently as possible, making the biggest impact. And right now, is it part of it? Yes, but is it to the point where I believe it's going to be funded through the LB 1024? No, I don't. But also then there's I'm looking at LB 1024 as a 10-year master plan, looking at all of the projects potentially, and we'll see what we do as the committee. We have a shell bill right now. And when you all have a chance to consider it and look at it on the floor, I think there's a way to do this where other projects potentially could be included in the future. But right now, I felt this one was important enough to where we should look at having it stand on its own and move forward quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gauth. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator McDonald.
I'll be here to close. Thank you.
Sounds great. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. I'm Marty Cordero, MARTIE CORDARO, and I'm President of Union Omaha. We appreciate your time today and thank Senator McDonald for introducing LB 621 at our request. LB 621 was introduced as one of two bills to assist the development of a multi-use stadium project that's being promoted by Union Omaha, which is Nebraska's only professional soccer club. Union Omaha is a member of USL League One. We won the championship in 21, and we led the league in attendance 2 out of the 3 years. Starting in 2020, COVID year, it's been an interesting 3 years for our franchise. Of note, LB 622 is the other bill, and it's awaiting a hearing in the Revenue Committee. Over the course of the last year, Union Omaha has been examining the potential of operating its own stadium to meet the needs of this growing sport. Soccer is now the 4th most popular sport in North America, surpassing hockey over the last 13 months, right behind football, baseball, and basketball. In Nebraska, more youth now play soccer than any other sport in our great state. And finally, the world's game is coming to North America in 2026 when the FIFA World Cup is played right here on American soil. This will give even more importance to the game and this new soccer facility. Union Omaha has identified 4 primary reasons for construction of the stadium. 1, to provide an anchor and asset to retain and recruit young professionals. 2nd, to bring professional sports to downtown Omaha. 3rd, to generate positive local, national, and international exposure for Nebraska. And 4th, to enhance community pride, image, reputation, and brand. While this is viewed as a stadium, it's more than about soccer. It's about meeting 3 pillars. Union Omaha, locating in North Downtown. 2nd, to develop a women's team, whether it's amateur or professional. We haven't landed on that yet. 3rd, to develop a youth academy that keeps youth from throughout Nebraska here. Many of Nebraska's top players are going to Denver, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, some of them even relocating their families so their top soccer players get better training. It's a goal of Union to develop a top-notch program that competes with those cities and keeps those families in our state. And finally, an overarching pillar is our community commitment. The facility will be a community one that's first about community and second about soccer. The facility will be available for all types of community groups with a focus on the North Omaha area. Community celebrations, walks, fundraisers, youth and high school sporting games are just some of the events that will take place. Union Omaha is committed to being a good community partner. Much like other teams who are in Oberyn Cores, we're creating a community benefits agreement that once implemented would enshrine Union Omaha's commitment to the area we will serve in and around the stadium. This includes focuses on internships, community engagement, and other tangible benefits to our neighborhood and the area we are seeking to join. As noted by Senator McDonald, the project is being looked at as a $100 million plan. Union Omaha did retain CSL, the same firm that completed the studies on Schwab Field and CHA Health Arena. Once completed, CSL indicates there will likely be 195 new net jobs, 7.1 million operations jobs earnings, 17 million in operations economic impact. Ancillary economic impact with the developer would be 130,000 square foot of multifamily residential, 150 more hotel rooms, 200 million in total economic impact, 22 million total fiscal impact, 450 new net jobs. We are happy to provide a copy of that report at the request of the committee. To be clear, we do have some outstanding items. We continue to work with the owners of the property where the stadium would be located. And also we're close on securing a lead project developer after our previous developer could no longer assist us. Once those steps are complete, this project has the potential to move very quickly. It's our hope this committee and the legislature will look favorably at commitment to this project when it's ready to go. This is why we believe placing funds in the Building and Site Development Program is the best way to do this. It will remain there until we can demonstrate the commitments of $25 million by individuals, nonprofits, or the city before we could draw down any of these resources. This, Madam Chair, is a reasonable approach in our estimation. Thank you for your time today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cordero. Are there any questions? Yes, Senator Jacobson.
I guess I have a couple questions. First of all, I think as Senator Kauth had expressed earlier, we've got a massive amount of money that went in ARPA funds to North Omaha. And this is now a fairly significant request for additional funding in Omaha. As I understand it, there'd be a $25 million match of the $100 million. And then you're also looking for a turn back tax as well as for the ongoing funding. So will this thing break even? Is it going to always need to be fed? How do you see these numbers working?
Well, there's three scenarios. We're working on scenario 3 where 621 would pass and 622 does not, but I can answer the other two. If LB 622 passes, but LB 621 does not, the $50 million is recouped in 19 years. If both LB 622 and 621 pass, the $50 million would be recouped in 21 years. I know that's been a question we've had from some on this committee. Don't yet have the scenario where this bill passes and 622 does not.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama, and thank you for being here today. Just a couple of questions for those of us who might not be as familiar with, myself included, with your team and the league. Can you explain a little bit as to what league you're in, what division you're in? I'm just curious. We're familiar with the NFL, amateur leagues like that. Where does your team fall in the spectrum of the leagues nationally, and what's the viability of that moving forward? My understanding is it's a relatively new team. If we're investing this much money into a project moving forward, what's the viability of the team and of the league as a whole?
First off, our commitment would be somewhere between 25 and 30 years to whoever the stadium owner ultimately would end up being. So from a viability perspective, that would be our commitment. The league we're in is the United Soccer League. It is a complementary league to Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer would be like Major League Baseball, if you will. The USL would be similar to minor league baseball. Omaha Storm Chasers being AAA. League One is similar to AA baseball. Championship level would be the league that we would move into should the stadium project come to fruition. So it would be ultimately the second tier of professional soccer in the country. It would put us in class with Louisville, Sacramento, Phoenix, Detroit. Those are some of the cities that Omaha would be partnering with throughout the country. And if you look at, and I know this is another question we got, the average attendance at USL championship games over this past year was about 5,700. But if you boil that down into the 9 most recent new stadiums or renovated stadiums that are soccer specific, that average was 7,500 fans per game at the USL championship level.
Thank you. And then one other question I had, or one thing I'd ask you to expand upon. You talked in your testimony about some of the youth soccer academies being pulled away elsewhere. What do those look like, and how could those benefit keeping folks here in Nebraska and also drawing in other youth for those academies? What would that program look like if you were to develop one here?
Well, not all, but most USL and MLS, all MLS clubs have an academy. It starts young. It starts at 7, 8, 9 years old, identifying players at a young age. Ozzie Cisneros is the one that's most recently from South Omaha. He moved to Kansas City. And he was playing before he would have graduated high school. He was playing on the first club down at Sporting KC most recently within the last year. That's an example of keeping players and families here, giving them opportunities here for top level of training. That would be both on the men's and women's side once we would start a women's program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Von Gilleren.
Thank you, Chairman Slama. Marty, we had a conversation, and I just want to rehash a couple things and maybe share with the whole group. First of all, where's the team playing now?
Playing at Warner Park right now.
Okay, all right, thank you. And that's you've been averaging 5,700.
No, right
Is that
now,
what you said?
our average at League One right now is right around 3,700.
Oh, got it.
The
Okay, all right.
5,700 is a league average for the league above us, championship.
Okay, all right. Thanks for clarifying that. And then we had a conversation. It seemed it's really don't know what the adjective to use, ironic, maybe, I don't know, to think about building a $100 million stadium so close to Morrison Stadium at Creighton. Could you share a little bit about our conversation, maybe add any more context to that that you might be able to about why Morrison isn't a viable place to play, already a fine existing stadium?
Great question. Yeah, at our core, what we do in the minor league sports world, if you will, the lower levels of professional sports, is community. This facility is going to be used 100, 150 times for walks, for fundraisers, for community events, a variety of those things. Then would be Union Omaha Soccer. Then would be the women's program and the academies. What Creighton would be, and we've had conversations with them, if we could schedule their building and manage it for 365 days, we're interested in having a conversation about playing with them. It goes back to the same reason why Warner Park exists. We had 301 events at Warner Park last year, plus 75 Storm Chasers games, plus 20 Union Omaha soccer matches, almost 400 events from March 15th until November 1st. Dramatically different than Schwab Field that's used about 4 weeks a year. So that's probably the best example. And that happened in this community, in this state, and it can happen again with soccer.
Good, thank you. One other final question. Is the team viable without the stadium? What happens if if this doesn't pass? What's the future of the team?
Great question. We spend an exorbitant amount of money flipping the field from baseball to soccer and back. We do that anywhere from 8 to 12 times a year. It's pretty taxing from a schedule perspective. Our first 2 regular season matches this year are actually going to be played at UNO because we didn't have dates at Warner Park. So it's physically impossible to start the women's program until we have a soccer-specific stadium. Same with the youth academy. So Warner Park is simply a Band-Aid right now for pro soccer. Will it be long-term viable at Warner Park if we don't have a new stadium? That's a difficult question to answer yes or no, but I will say probably not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Any additional questions? See none. Thank you very much, Mr. Cordero.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Slama and committee members. My name is Steve Swanstrom, S-T-E-V-E, Swanstrom, S-W-A-N-S-T-R-O-M. And this is my first time testifying before a committee, so I appreciate your patience today. I'm here on behalf of, I'm the president and CEO of Centrist Federal Credit Union and our 300 employees and 130,000 members across the state. We have branch locations in the greater Omaha area, Grand Island, and North Platte. I'm also here as a member of the Omaha Chamber of Commerce, and we'll speak to that in a minute. We've been partnered with the ownership group and Marty of the Union Omaha soccer team, who also overlaps with the Storm Chasers baseball team, for over a decade. So Marty mentioned that the Union Omaha soccer team has been in operation for 4 years, but we were involved in a lot of the early conversations to get the soccer team to Omaha and get it off the ground and begin playing games. Our 300 employees and our 130,000 members are always looking for affordable entertainment. That's one of the things that is critically important, I believe, as I hear about the state wanting to attract and retain younger folks into the state. And so being able to have those affordable opportunities, we at Centrist provide those opportunities through free events that we offer today for both the soccer team as well as the Storm Chaser baseball team. Examples are we do a free night at the baseball stadium once a year for any of our members that want to sign up. We usually get between 1,000 and 1,200 individuals that free of charge. We pay for the game. They can bring their families, whatever they want to do. So we try to make that affordable. With a soccer-only stadium, we feel that we can expand that reach and provide, as Marty said, additional dates that we can provide that free entertainment. The other thing that we do today is we do a free movie night at the end of the baseball season at Warner Park. And again, that's open to the community at large. That's not just for our members, that's for anybody in the community. And we usually attract about 3,000 people and their children and families to come out to the ballpark. The kids get to get out on the field, run around, play catch, do things that normally during the season you can't do. And again, that's free of charge, sponsored and hosted by Centris Federal Credit Union for the community. Marty talked about how this new soccer stadium is intended to be a give back to the community and involve the community. And we've been, again, a corporate partner of theirs for over a decade. And I can speak to the commitment of the ownership group, the commitment of Marty as the president, and what they're trying to accomplish for the state of Nebraska as a whole, and as well as providing that affordable entertainment that so many families are looking for. It's a big project. You all heard that. Marty gave you the numbers. It needs help. And we as a corporate sponsor, as a corporate citizen, are happy to provide what we can do as a corporate sponsor to help. But it really is going to require the entire state, the entire village to try to make this a reality. And so we greatly appreciate your consideration of this project. On behalf of the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce, at the groundbreaking ceremony last week for the Mutual of Omaha Tower, the chamber mentioned that they have a goal over the next 20 years of bringing 30,000 additional citizens or residents into the urban core of Omaha, which is not just going to benefit Omaha, it'll benefit the entire state of Nebraska with the additional tax revenues and the additional jobs that can come from that. I think that is a significant goal to have. As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I'm happy to help support that goal. And as an employer, I'm happy to do our part to try to, again, provide affordable entertainment that helps bring those individuals, those 30,000 folks to the state. And again, with Union Omaha Soccer being in that urban core area, trying to provide a younger generation affordable and viable sports entertainment that, as we heard, a lot of kids nowadays are soccer nuts and soccer junkies. And as Marty said, soccer is now the fourth most popular sport in America. And so we're excited about being a partner on this project. We appreciate your consideration of the project, and I'm happy to field any questions at this time on my part.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Swanstrom. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Salama, Vice Chairman Jacobson, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important issue. My name is Scott Sullivan, spelled SCOTT-SULLIVAN, and I'm President and CEO of the Nebraska Credit Union League. I'm here today in support of LB 621. Credit unions in general support all well-intended efforts aimed at driving economic development and growth. Specifically, this measure would create additional incentives for funding and investment while making public and private procurement channels more inclusive. Several Nebraska credit unions already play a vital role in the state's economy by acting as an affordable source of capital and a reliable lending partner to community-based businesses. If LB 621 passes, it would create new job opportunities and further facilitate and improve quality of life that includes increased access to additional opportunities for existing and future citizens. On behalf of Nebraska credit unions and their 555,000 members, I thank you for your consideration of this testimony and for holding this important hearing. And we would respectfully request that you advance LB 621 out of committee.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for testifying. Is there any additional proponent testimony for LB 621? Is there any opponent testimony to LB 621? Seeing none, any neutral testimony? And Senator McDonald will bring you up to close. And for the record, there are no letters for the record for LB 621.
Thank you. I don't know if some of you had a chance to watch any football yesterday, but Kansas City Chiefs did pretty well. And they had a hell of a party afterwards. I think about Kansas City, I think about some of the decisions they've made, and you look at where we are 190 miles away pretty much from that stadium, and the zoo. We've got one of the top 3 zoos in the country, our top tourist attraction in the state of Nebraska. And thinking about investing in this versus possibly some other options, and looking at the money that this body has set aside for North and South Omaha, and trying to make a change there that's going to possibly make the next generation a whole different world for them. And looking at competing against our neighbors and having different kind of attractions, this is really kind of a small step. Now, I'm not saying that every dollar that belongs to the taxpayers isn't important, but if you look at what other communities are doing around us, and for us to have this kind of opportunity, and again, whatever that sport might be, and this happens to be soccer, and it's the sport of the next generation, and it's the world sport. And for us to be able to make this kind of investment and have an opportunity to possibly look at how we can grow that sport within the state of Nebraska, and have that kind of future, of course, maybe never like Kansas City had last night, but on a smaller scale where we could be that for this area, the place where you travel to watch championship soccer. And I think that's the way we should look at it, but it's economic development. And it's an opportunity for us to do something like Kansas City did years ago, I believe in 1973 with that new stadium. And they said they're going to take the next step, and they're going to have world championship football someday. And they're doing it. And so I think we have an opportunity here. And again, it's an investment. But I think it's a sound investment, and we really do have a chance to do something for the future. I'm here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Are there any committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This closes out the hearing for LB 621. We'll reset now for the hearing for LB 278 with Senator Walz.
Thank you.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Commerce and Insurance Committee. My name is Lynn Walz, LYNNE-WALZ, and I represent District 15, which is made up of Dodge County and Valley. I'm here today to introduce LB 278, a bill that would guide the Department of Economic Development and the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority to obtain state and federal grants to create safe, accessible, affordable housing to help fulfill the goals of the Olmsted Plan. So just so we're all on the same page, I want to give you just a brief background on the Olmsted Plan. In 1999, the Supreme Court made the Olmsted decision and urged every state to develop an Olmsted Plan. The case settled that requiring people to receive services in a setting isolated or separated from the community was discrimination against persons with disabilities. Here in Nebraska, we did not have a formal Olmsted Plan until 2016, when Senator Kathy Campbell introduced and successfully passed LB 1033, which required the Department of Health and Human Services to develop an Olmsted Plan. That brought us now to, or it brings us then to 2019, when I introduced LB 570, which required DHHS to hire an independent consultant to assist with the analysis and implementation of the Olmsted Plan. In December of 2021, we received that report back. The review found that there has been little progress made in increasing access to safe, affordable, accessible housing for individuals with disabilities. It also noted that increasing the supply of affordable, accessible housing units for individuals with disabilities must become a priority for Nebraska. The report also noted that the Department of Economic Development and NIFA should take more of a leadership role in prioritizing state and federal resources to provide housing for people with disabilities, which brings us now to LB 278 that I'm introducing today. One of the most important factors for individuals with disabilities to live or to continue to live independently is certainly having safe, accessible, affordable housing. There is a severe shortage of housing like this in our state, and we actually lost quite a bit during the flooding in 2019 in Sarpy County. This bill helps guide more funding and attention to fill the gap in our housing market. The bill is pretty straightforward. Section 2 addresses NYFA's role in fulfilling the housing goals set forth in the Olmsted Plan, making clear that they should use their best efforts to obtain state and federal grants for the purpose of building safe, affordable, accessible housing. We are also asking that NYFA works with DHHS in obtaining these grants. Section 3 reflects the exact same language, but for DED. Additionally, I handed out, I did not hand out an amendment, did I? I will hand out an amendment that I've been working with NYFA. They pointed out that we should be clear in our language that in reality, all three entities need to be working with each other, not just NYFA working with DHHS and DED working with DHHS. For that reason, in subsection 3 of both sections, we are adding DED to NYFA section and NYFA to DED section. There was concern that it may seem like no singular entity is in charge of obtaining these grants. So we added a simple line requesting that DED will use its best efforts to coordinate and contract with NYFA to develop and administer grants to fulfill the goals of the Olmsted Plan. As we all know, housing is a massive issue in the state, and it's one that all Nebraskans are dealing with. I can't even imagine the struggle that individuals with accessibility issues are having in finding appropriate homes. Additionally, with the current work that Senator Breezy and Vargas are doing with the housing, this seems like a perfect time as we need to bring this bill forward. If we are looking at working on housing issues, we must also include individuals with disabilities to ensure that they have appropriate, safe housing that's taken into account for many individuals with limited income. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator Walls. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Kath.
Senator Walls, does this include housing that is supported housing, like through Duet or through any of the
It certainly
agencies?
could.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Senator Kath. Any additional questions? Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Chair Solano. Thank you, Senator Walls. Your fiscal note looks like DED says that the bill, which would require them to use its best efforts to obtain state and federal grants, would require an additional quarter FTE. And that comes out to that 26, almost 27,000 number, and then almost 28,000 number that's represented on the front of your fiscal note package.
Yeah.
But then NYFA says that they would have to hire a consultant grant writer, which would cost $20,000 per fiscal year. But that isn't also represented on the front. So that those aren't added together.
Right.
Do they both need to add people to do this?
I mean, that's kind of what my understanding is, and I apologize. I haven't been able to read through the fiscal notes as
I'm
well as
sure
I
it's-
should have
yeah, just-
yet. But I will, and I'll try to get some clarification on that for
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much.
Great, thank you,
And
Senator.
myself.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Yes, Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama, and thank you, Senator Walls, for bringing this. I think this is an incredibly important area that people don't always pay attention to, and that's folks in the disabilities community having access to things like this. I won't go on too much about the importance of it to me personally with folks that I know, but I think that autonomy and community-based resources are incredibly important in this circumstance. To clarify, just for myself, you talk a lot about accessibility and disability in the language of this. This is pertaining to folks both in the physical disabilities and the developmental disabilities community, or is it just one or the other?
I would say both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Any additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Walls.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now take proponent testimony for LB 278. Good afternoon.
Chairwoman Slama and members of the committee. And I think I can answer. I think I can answer any fiscal note problems because you'll probably save that in about 15, 20 minutes when institutionalized care costs maybe twice, maybe, I don't know. It's ridiculous. And so we can just put that aside, any fiscal note issues. And so it would be nice to have this cooperation and to force DHHS to cooperate because, I mean, I tried to get a hold of DHHS just to see if I could, have if I could use Medicaid rides to mentor.
I'm sorry, just for the record, could you say and spell your name, please?
Oh, yeah.
No worries.
My name is Josephine Litwinowitz, JosephIneLitwinowicz. I'll probably push my way to the front of the line as many cases as possible because of the pain has gotten much worse. But yeah, and so I had to go to an award ceremony just to speak to the CEO because and so and within 5 minutes, our communications director or her handler thumbed me a card, and so it's impossible. I've dealt with them, and I think they have to be made to do it, and I wasn't. I just got off the bus. I tell you, I can't drive anymore. I had a couple more things, but there are a couple of good things. Yeah, I was homeless once, and 2015, thereabouts is good enough, and I couldn't find a place to live, and so anything with a waiting list was impossible, and so I had a dedicated soul from Lutheran Family Services to help me out. And she called every day. And so she called places that didn't have a waiting list. And so I got one, and it was just a miracle, really. I don't know what they would have done because I wasn't going to go to any long-term care facility. So I don't, whatever would have had to been done. But, and so, because those long-term care facilities and nursing homes, they're actually pretty disgusting. I know people out west in particular, and everywhere, and the staffing shortages are so bad that I'm not going to one of those. If I have to take the rest of my blood thinners and do something, because it's just not going to happen. And so we need housing, and we need all tranches of housing, I guess, as it were, because one affects the other. It's an interesting relationship they have with each other. And so, but we definitely need disability accessible housing. And, I know people that, well, anyway, I actually met, this was back then too, I met a person with MS who was living at the mission. Well, I was actually homeless, but I couldn't do it because I had a little more disability, and he was waiting to find a place. And, so that goes all the way forever, and so I really do think they really have to put their nose to the grindstone for themselves. And that's just my dealings with the agency. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. We're saving a bunch of money from, I'll just leave that to myself. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Harner, SHANNON, HARNER. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority. And I'm pleased to be here today as Senator Walls indicated, NIFE has been working with her on the amendment to this bill. We do firmly believe that Olmsted is a critical piece of housing for the state of Nebraska. I serve on the Olmsted Steering Committee. Other members of my staff serve on the Olmsted work groups. And NIFA takes many actions that do support the creation of housing for persons with disabilities, including things such as adding Olmsted Plan updates to the quarterly agenda of the Nebraska Commission on Housing and Homelessness, encouragement of public input from disability advocates through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Qualified Allocation Plan process and the Department of Economic Development's Consolidation Plan public input process. Reviewing ways to increase accessible units in HUD-funded housing developments from the minimum Section 502 requirement, which requires 5% minimum of accessible units per development. We think that that could be increased on a voluntary basis with additional funding. And making informational resources available, including online listings for our low-income housing tax credit accessible units. Accessible housing is one of the focuses of the recently released statewide strategic housing framework. And thus NIFA and other housing council members and other organizations across the state will continue to research sources of available funding, including federal, state, and private funds. NIFA continues to monitor the availability of HUD Section 811 supportive housing for persons with disabilities program. However, this funding hasn't recently been available, and the Olmsted Housing Workshop Group also works to monitor this as a potential funding resource. Traditionally, NIFA has not focused on application of grants to support its efforts. However, we agree it's an opportunity for us to do more, and we have no objection to being directed to do this work. NIFA understands the need for and supports the creation of accessible housing for persons with disabilities. One of the keys to the amendment that is proposed to you is putting together NIFA, DED, and DHHS as a triumvirate to continue to talk to one another, so we're not creating silos with regard to who's doing what, and also taking those programs when funds are available and consolidating them at NIFA so that we're running all of those funds together through a program that's consistent. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Horner. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama, and thank you for being here. I appreciate that. Off the top of your head, do you have any idea how much money we're looking at in terms of these grants? What's out there right now that we're not getting? And what would this bring in, I guess, is my question.
I do not have a good sense of what the monetary amount for these grants would be, so I'm sorry that I don't have that information.
But you estimate that it would be, I mean, we're talking about some significant amount of funding here, right?
Yes, we're talking about a significant amount of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Are there any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Slama and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Brad, B-R-A-D, Meurrens, M-E-U-R-R-E-N-S, and I am the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska. Disability Rights Nebraska is the designated protection and advocacy organization for persons with disabilities in Nebraska, and I'm here in strong support of LB 278. Cornell University's 2019 Disability Status Report estimates that about 10% of our state's population identify as a person with a disability, which is around 228,300 individuals of all ages. And there are Nebraskans with disabilities in every single county. My handout will demonstrate a county breakdown by demographics by county. The report also shows that the living experiences of persons with disabilities and those without disabilities are sharply contrasted. For example, the poverty rate of working age people with disabilities in Nebraska was 22%. For people without disabilities, it was 8%. People with disabilities are more likely to live in poverty. Poverty compromises the ability to obtain safe and affordable housing, and disability limits those options even further. So I'll get to the point. A significant need exists for more safe, affordable, and accessible housing for Nebraskans with disabilities. We are pleased to see the inclusion of the word accessibility in this bill. While building more affordable housing is needed and laudable, especially for those Nebraskans with disabilities who live on the margins, the goal is defeated if the housing is not accessible. For example, if there's steps to the front door, how is a person who uses a wheelchair going to get to the front door? It needs to be accessible. If safe and affordable housing were built accessible from the get-go, there would be less need to modify or retrofit, decreasing future costs for all parties involved, and increasing housing opportunities for Nebraskans with disabilities and allowing them to live independently so that they may live, remain, and thrive in their communities. And for that, we recommend that the legislature advance LB 278. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Mearns. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Cal.
Thank you, Senator Solomon. What is the definition of affordable? I mean, as far as when you're talking about this type of housing, is it a percentage of income or is it a specific number? How do you define that?
Well, that would be a good question. I wouldn't have a good answer for the definition of affordable. I would defer to the housing folks for that.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Jacobson.
I guess I'd just like to clarify one statement you just made when you're suggesting that all houses be built with the accessibility. Are you talking really everything that NIFA would do would be accessible at the get-go?
Well, I would say that following the bill, if there were grants or opportunities for funding to make more affordable, accessible housing, then that would be done. I don't think it would say that every single, from here on out, ad infinitum has to meet some sort of criteria. But I think that we do need to build more accessible housing stock for persons with disabilities, and I think this would be an opportunity to do that.
Right. Yeah, and I just want to make clear that we'd be looking really at providing additional grant dollars to be able to add to the affordable, so that those that were built accessible would have some grant dollars to help cover the additional cost to be able to make the home accessible, is what I'm understanding we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah, I guess my concern is obviously, it gets back to Senator Cal's question. Affordable is a really good question right now because frankly, no new housing is affordable right now.
Sure.
And when we really start looking at low to moderate income people, and that's one of the big challenges we have is how do we drive that cost down? And the only way we can drive it down is not add additional costs without having an offsetting grant or some kind of way to pay for that. But I completely agree that, yeah, we've got to increase the accessibility, and it's certainly more expensive to come in after the fact. So I hear what you're saying there. I just wanted to make sure I clarified that NIFA is not going to come out and say everything's got to be affordable going forward, because so our bill accessible going forward, because now our affordability really is going to go away.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Mearns.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairperson Slama and the rest of the committee. My name is Alicia Christensen. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Together, a nonprofit organization committed to preventing and ending hunger and homelessness in Omaha. Our day-to-day operations focus on assisting participants who face food and housing insecurity.
Sorry, Ms. Christensen.
Yes,
Could you please spell your name for the record?
You're right. I forgot about that part. I always try and mark it on here, and then I feel silly about doing that. But obviously, time well spent. ALICIACHRISTENSEN. And most of my points I have down here anyway are reiterative of what has already been said. I would clarify that typically for HUD definition purposes, affordable housing is something that costs less than 30% of an individual's or the household's monthly income. So they're spending less than 30% on their monthly income on housing costs, which typically include utilities for that purpose. But our case managers, in looking at affordable housing for our participants who are often exiting or at risk of entering homelessness, we have firsthand experience about how it's difficult to secure affordable housing in general. And then if you add a participant with a disability, it can be difficult, if not impossible, for our case managers to do their jobs. And this takes an enormous toll on them, but also particularly our most vulnerable community members. So the economic realities mean that developers are unlikely to take on affordable housing projects without government support. So we're talking about low-income housing tax credits and the Nebraska Affordable Trust Fund. And NYFA and the Department of Economic Development and DHHS do an absolutely wonderful job of administering these funds and getting them to people who have ways they've leveraged private financing to create opportunities for affordable households, or to be affordable for households that are low income. And so we appreciate the agency's efforts that provide these opportunities, but a lot of these inefficient or insufficiently incentivize the development of affordable housing that is accessible to those with a disability. So for instance, recently I submitted a comment for the, during the public comment period on the qualified action plan for the Department of Economic Development's plan for the housing. There's a lot of acronyms that I typically use, so it's hard to say these. The Nebraska Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so this plan was outlining the project evaluation process, and it provided a matrix for scoring, showing how the affordability period would receive extra points if it was longer, for example. Other important considerations were giving additional points. However, the proposed scoring did not award additional points to projects that that featured accessible features like wheel-in showers or widened doorways and lowered kitchen counters and sinks, for example. So that said, this legislation aims to reduce the instances where all these worthy housing projects are competing for the same scarce resources. It's adding to that pool of projects that need to get done anyway and allows the case workers together to do their job. And they're really good at it. And they can't place a person exiting homelessness in housing if there is no housing available for them. And we really want to help those people find safe and sustainable housing. And so we ask you to support this legislation that will prioritize the important efforts to fund development and meeting this basic human need, which is shelter. So thank you. I'm sorry for the scattered nature, but testimony, I was trying to avoid all the stuff so you wouldn't have to hear the repetition, but I'm happy to field any questions.
No worries, and thank you, Ms. Christensen. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Cal.
Sorry. I have a question. Thank you. Does this also include seniors, or would it be seniors who have disabilities who qualify for this? So we're not talking about housing for seniors.
I would imagine that my reading of the bill is that it would include, as long as there is an accessibility component, that it's not confined to disability accessibility, that a lot of that accessibility would be for anyone that needs. I think that would all be categorized under disability. I don't know how official that would be.
It makes it a much bigger group. But to clarify, this bill is really just saying that you need a grant writer to seek these grants, not that the state will be funding these things, but that we'll be funding someone to go out and actively look at a federal and a state level for the grants to do this work.
That's my understanding. Yes. I think that it is like, yes, I don't want to sitting right there. No, I think that similar to, well, I mean, the state funds some of the programs that are administered by, say, NYFA or DED, but for instance, the low-income housing tax credit, that some of that funding is federal and some of it is matched by the state. But the goal with that is to provide tax credits for private financing to give to the developers. So it's an incentive program, and it's not you're not giving out, here's the whole cost, right?
Right. This is for someone to help find those, put those together, and make those things happen.
Yes,
so
it's just
in compliance with us.
Making a bigger toolkit, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Ballard.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're okay. Thank you for being here. You may not know the answer to this question, but do you know off the top of your head how many units does Omaha have of affordable housing? And then to dovetail, how much does that satisfy demand? Like 70%? I don't know if you would know any of those.
In providing comments on Omaha's Housing Affordability Action Plan, I spoke with one of our case managers, about just to ask if you could wake up tomorrow and have sufficient permanent supportive housing, which is typically for our chronic homelessness participants exiting homelessness, how many would you need? Like, what's your dream number? And he said 300 easy. And so I don't know how many there is available, but I think obviously we cater to a particular demographic, but often when there's a shortage, that all compresses downward. So it creates more and more instability and crisis at the most vulnerable levels, because those are the people least able to go further outside their transportation network or support network, or be able to afford just a little bit more per month, or find someone that accepts their Section 8 or SSDI funds. So I think that they have far more constraints. And so that's the picture I can give you, because that's our realm of expertise. But that is just one perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Additional committee questions? See none. Thank you, Ms. Christensen. All right. Additional proponent testimony for LB 278. Seeing none, is there any opposition testimony? Seeing none, is there any neutral testimony for LB 278? Seeing none, Senator Walls, you're welcome to close. And as you're doing that, just for the record, there is one proponent letter that we've received in support of your bill.
All right. Well, very quickly, thank you, guys. And thanks to everybody who came to testify today on this very important issue. So just again, to reiterate, LB 278 essentially pushes our state toward housing goals laid out by the Olmstead Plan. We are just directing NYFA and the Department of Economic Development to work alongside with DHHS in ensuring that Nebraskans with disabilities have safe and accessible housing. So she already answered the what is affordable housing question, which is great, but I'd be happy to take any other questions that you might have.
Thank you, Senator Walls. Are there any additional? Yes, Senator Von Gilleren.
Yeah, Senator Walls, thank you. Just real quick, we were looking over the fiscal notes. There's even a little bit more confusion because the DHHS fiscal note, it shows a zero expenditure, but down below in the verbiage, it says that 2 additional FTEs would be required.
Oh, get used to that.
Did you have to figure it out? Okay,
No,
Senator
I'll
Bustar
check
hasn't
it
figured
out.
out, so I'll yield the remainder of my time.
You get no time in this committee, Senator Von Gilleren. Senator Bostar.
Thank you, Chair Slama. Thank you, Senator Walls. Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. So my understanding is that it pertains to the cost for the FTEs if they were to write the grants. However, under the bill, they aren't the ones writing the grants. So it's just outlining what it would cost them. It is interesting that presumably for the same grants that DED would be writing, there's a between what DED quoted at around $25,000 and DHHS quoted at like $180,000. But that's why it's in the notes and not in the box.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Senator Bostar. Any additional questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator Walls.
Thank you.
All right, that closes out our hearing on LB 278. We'll turn around and have our last hearing of the day, LB 633 with Senator McKinney. Good afternoon, Senator McKinney.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Terrell McKinney, Terrell McKinney, and I represent the 11th Legislative District in North Omaha, and I'm here to discuss LB 633, establishing a Husker Fund. The intent of the Husker Fund is to make Nebraska the innovation capital of the Midwest by focusing on investing in the latest startups in the state's key industries. This will also allow an opportunity for the business community to invest in this space in a way that continues to grow our state. Currently, our biggest strength in Nebraska is our diverse economy, which allowed our state to come out of the pandemic economically sound. We're highly competitive in the finance and banking industry, the insurance industry, the Department of Defense, manufacturing industry, agribusiness industry, and even emerging industries like sports tech. Sadly, it is widely known in the startup community that building startups in Nebraska is tough because of our lack of infrastructure at certain stages of business ventures. I am hopeful the creation of a Husker Fund will begin the process of solving this problem. 2/3 of our growth in our GDP has come from high growth technology. Nebraska has an opportunity to take advantage of these available funds. In doing so, we can make Nebraska the place that every innovative startup considers starting a business or relocating to in the Midwest. It is important to understand that healthy economic ecosystems in other states have been one of the reasons for some of our top talent to move. Nebraska can be the go-to state for every top Midwest startup in these core industries through the Husker Fund. My goal is to make Nebraska, as I said, the epicenter of venture capital and startups for our key industries. Using the Husker Fund, we can attract top talent to solve high-level problems. For instance, growing the whole state economically from Scottsbluff to Omaha. There have been similar successes across the country. Illinois has its Illinois Growth and Innovation Fund, which started in 2002 with $74 million and has grown to $1 billion plus, a strong indication for its success, which requires a 2-to-1 match. Indiana has the Indiana Next Level Fund, which started with $500 million and is split into 2 tranches. The first tranche of $250 million is currently being deployed. It requires a 1-to-1 match. For example, if it commits $5 million to a fund, the recipient must invest at least $5 million into Indiana companies over the life of the fund. Another state is North Dakota, which has the North Dakota Growth Fund. It started with $100 million from the state of North Dakota, which is currently being deployed, and it requires a 1-to-1 match. I hope that we can move LB 633 forward to put our state in a position to compete with neighboring states and eventually be a leader by creating a Husker Fund to partner with our businesses in our state to grow our state as a whole. And I think it would help with attracting talent, retaining talent, and, taking Nebraska to the future. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Are there any questions from the committee on LB 633? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Kauth.
Sorry. How does this interact with the site and the McDonald's LB 644, the site and development plan bill? Is it similar? Is it complementary?
I don't know the particulars of that bill.
Okay. Basically, developing mega sites for industry and development. I don't know if it's totally different or if it would. Everybody behind you is like.
It's different. That would be to try to develop some land across the state so we could attract businesses like Amazon,
the big,
and those other ones. This would be more pertaining to assisting with growing businesses in the state from startups and things like that.
So an incubator type or no?
Yeah, it could most likely it could work with incubators and things like that, but it'd be more so, finding, it would be capital to assist with growing businesses and helping startups as they grow and scale up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Senator Ballard.
Thank you for being here, Senator McKinney. How did you come up with the $62 million ask?
It was just a number.
Just a number. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, additional committee questions. Seeing none, thank you very much,
All right,
Senator
no problem.
McKinney. We'll now open up proponent testimony for LB 633.
Apologize for the laptop, but if you
Oh.
invite a nerd to a party.
No worries. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Chairman Slama, committee folks. I appreciate the opportunity today. My name is Manny Covedo, Manny. QUE, V as in Victor, ED, O as in Oscar. I'm going to use my notes a bit here. I believe that my testimony today is more to provide some background and color and understanding of what's really going on out there in the industry. So, with your indulgence, I'm the Associate Director of Education for the Nebraska Startup Academy. The Nebraska Startup Academy is a new nonprofit. We're located on 24th and Lake. We also spend time at Millworks Common, South Omaha, and Bellevue. We consider that part of the East Omaha complex that really needs our time and attention. We started out as a SEDI nonprofit academy to identify, promote, develop, and really help startups come along. What we've discovered in a very short period of time is the G factor, and that's the geographic disadvantage that many folks in our states have. So today we've eliminated the barriers. We may be headquartered in North Omaha, but we will be addressing startup opportunities throughout the state of Nebraska in affiliation with a number of folks. We're currently funded by philanthropy and corporate funds. We'll remain nonprofit. Our sole mission is to identify those startups, help them get to that first level. Many people don't understand that here in Nebraska, we have great investors. We have some wonderful folks. I'm a big fan of what's going on with Invest Nebraska, the Nebraska Angels, a number of the other private firms. But to a large extent, those are growth investments. And prior to that, there are seed and pre-seeds that need to be acknowledged, built, grown, and they need a lot of support. Talk a little bit about my personal background. I've been in technology for 40 years. I spent 20 years of that working for multinationals. I've worked in 20 countries. I've lived in 12 states. I'm a real tech guy, right? So I've really been around. Came to Nebraska for personal reasons 20 years ago, fell in love, decided to raise my children here. My grandchildren are here now, so I'm here. And as part of the tech community here, I've had the pleasure 20 years of that in corporate and 20 years doing startups. 3 of those 4 were done here in Nebraska. Extremely painful. In the end, when we got to the growth stage, we really didn't have the capital here or access to investment here. So all of those investments were provided growth capital from out-of-state firms. And unfortunately, in all cases, they have left the state. And it's really been a sore spot for me as we go along. We decided to start the Startup Academy because we saw the need. And we've been very fortunate. January 1st, we recruited onto our team one of the top startup developers in the country. His name is Charlie Cuddy. Charlie last year was involved with 800 startups working for the Calcanis Group out of San Francisco. We decided to launch January 1st, regardless of funding, because there's such a need that really needs to happen here. In the month of January alone, we've had 28 new founders come forward that we're working with. There's a high failure rate, and you have to have the kind of tolerant capital that understands there are fabulous returns, but there are risks, usually about a 70% failure rate. And so you work through that. Then you work through other programs. Again, I mentioned NMotion and Accelerator. I know Scott's here today. We love those guys. We're the feeder, right? We're going to make sure that there's enough people coming at them that we make good investments at Invest Nebraska. We make good investments through the NMotion and the Accelerator programs. We work with the Nebraska Business Development Corporation. We work with UNMC. We believe we'll kick off a startup academy with the Rake School by April. There's just a significant need to do it. And part of the issue for us as a community is we need to become a yes state when it comes to business development and startup. It's not our reputation. In fact, we're seen as a place you come and poach easy business at that startup realm. And it's disruptive, but what happens more than anything else is it affects your general workforce. And what happens when you're not a yes community, especially young people, see their future elsewhere, and maybe I'll come back at a later date. What's happened now is we've exported over 500 tech jobs that we really needed. And those were Nebraska companies with Nebraska projects that couldn't find Nebraska citizens to operate those things. We're losing our tech leadership in the startup community because they're going elsewhere. Very high friendlies, programs like you heard today, Illinois, Indiana. We're not losing them to California and Texas. We're losing them to neighboring states. And I know I'm going to come up on my time, so I apologize. I would just ask that we consider as we move forward that these funds have a vital role going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kveda. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Ballard.
Thank you, Chair Saul. So when entrepreneurs come to your academy, what are their major needs? So is it I need to figure out how to apply for an LLC? I'll let you.
Yeah, we start at the very basics. Is this a concept that will work? Is this, are there going to be consumers to pay for this? But they need everything. We break it down into the business concept itself, and qualifying it, making sure there's an available marketplace. When it comes to what we call technical services, banking, accounting, et cetera, most of them are very naive, especially folks in the communities we're currently working in. There is no family and friends to support them either in matching funds or frankly, technical services, basic legal and accounting capabilities. So we give them all the basics. When they're ready to move on to more mature programs, there are more mature programs available here in Nebraska, and I'm sure Scott will talk about some of those in a moment. But for the most part, we see it across the board. I have a concept, what should I do? We'll take them that early, but we'll mature them through. And we're seeing quite a bit right now, especially in artificial intelligence, robotics, the biosciences, cloud technologies, cyber ranges, those kinds of things. We're seeing everything across the industry. Tech is one of those things that tech touches everything. So it's easy to talk tech, but at the end of the day, it belongs to some vertical industry and it has to be meaningful there. So to answer your question, there is actually a curriculum, and I'll be happy to send along a copy of the whole curriculum to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
I'd be
you.
happy to do that.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Additional committee questions? Senator Von Gilleren.
Yeah, thank you for being here, Mr. Quevedo. I appreciate what you're doing here. One of the interesting things about being old is I've seen a lot of things tried before.
Sure.
Some have succeeded, some have not. In fact, you mentioned 24th and Lake, and at one point there was an incubator program there. It was in an old Hinky Dinky store, and that since has been torn down. That program was not successful. I've worked with the chamber on their REACH program with Winsley Duran and others, and so I've seen many of these things tried. I'm not speaking negatively over this program by any means, but I've seen a lot of things kind of come and go, and very few have been successful. What the challenges always seem to be business acumen and capital. And capital is usually, there's an old saying that businesses don't die for lack of business, they die for lack of capital. Sure. So if you could just give me a little bit more structure on that, like the REACH program at the chamber has a lot of structure and a lot of momentum and finance and history behind it, and it struggles to be successful. What are you going to do that's different than what's already been done and already been tried?
Well, first of all, I think the expertise has been a big component of that. One of the most valuable things we're doing is soliciting area corporate executives to be involved right up front. So those, and I'll use the example, if you're familiar with Mike Lechtenberger at Nebraska Tech Collaborative. He's a wonderful proponent, sits on our advisory committee, knows what he's doing, understands, the difference between a tech leader and a business leader. Mike Castling has been very supportive of us in some of the areas that we've talked about. The CIO forum or CIO committee of Nebraska Tech Collaborative have been very active. By the way, when I say active, alongside this, we're not waiting, we're going. January 1st, we left the gates. We're also raising a $10 million private equity fund to do exactly this. It's not a lot of money. It's not going to go a long way, but it's something. What I love is all those folks I'm talking about wrote checks personally to get this thing going. So it's about buy-in at the right level and getting the community involved. There's so many resources. For example, the Nebraska Business Development Corp. We need to utilize those. We need to assure those. And to be very honest with you, when it's not working, you got to be tough enough to call it. And I think that when you talk about a 70% failure rate, I also say that 100% of our entrepreneurs that make it were part of that failure rate at one time before. It's understanding how to pivot, make a change, get things going in the right direction. And so we're very excited about it. But to answer your question point blank, you get senior executives from the business community involved and you get their money involved, you'll get attention and time and focus. And again, it's also, we like to call it not Nebraska nice. And in the tech community, when someone says Nebraska nice, it's not meant as a negative. It means we're going to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. Maybe we'll do something. This is about not being Nebraska nice. You're in, you're out. You make the changes or you're out of the academy. Those are the sort of things that we're talking about. The academy is completely separate from the funding we're talking about here, but we need sources. And I'll use Invest Nebraska as an example. They've been fantastic, but you got to get up to a certain level of viability, and that's fair and reasonable. That's their charter. That's what they do. We just need to get to that point in the game. So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
long answer, I apologize,
that's
but
great.
it's really
It's a
about getting the
difficult
leaders
topic.
involved.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Senator Von Gillern. Any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Anybody
today.
need a prospectus or a curriculum? I'll make sure it gets sent over.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm loving life. How are you?
Great. You guys are about ready done. My name is Lexi Wellman. It's Alexi. Last name's Wellman. My current position is CEO of Altava, which was formerly Yahoo. I also serve on a couple public company boards, and I also am part of Springtide Capital, which is a venture capital fund that invests solely in healthcare, AI, and data type companies, which does not tell you at all why I'm here today. I am here because about 7 years ago, when Yahoo was still Yahoo before Verizon bought it, I got very interested in the startup ecosystem here in Nebraska. Started with my iPad to try to sketch out what the ecosystem was here, and very quickly found out there was large gaps across various avenues of that. Then started working with some founders and realized it was almost impossible for them to get capital here in Nebraska. So I began to use my resources outside the state because they could not find capital here. Outside of myself and my husband, we started angel investing in a few of those because that's the only source of capital they could find. So when it came to my attention that we were finally looking at something at a state level to put capital into this ecosystem, I'm here because I'm a believer in that. I don't have any ponies in the game other than some startups that are already going, but I am here because the gaps we have are several, but I have seen tremendous momentum in the last 3 years in the startup community. Manny's very humble. He was very humble why they're going to succeed. They're going to succeed because the people driving that are founders that have scaled businesses multiple times and know exactly what they're doing. He probably wouldn't say that, so I'm going to say that for him because that's why I see the difference there. But when we get to the capital side, there are huge gaps. So I know a great question of some of the previous bills I got to sit through and hear that those are great monies going to infrastructure and buildings and those type of things. This money is very different. In the startup world, you have various levels where you need that capital. You need that first angel round coming in. Then you need your pre-seed and then your seed and your Series A, Series B, Series C. When I started this looking around 5-7 years ago, we didn't really have any, period. We were slowly starting to put together capital. We have the Proven Fund, Invest Nebraska's, outside of that has been there, but there hasn't been much else. We now have the Ag Tech Fund, which is, I think, called Grit Road now. We also have capital that's starting, this Manny mentioned, that's going to be at the very early stage. We still have gaps in all of those, even with those coming. So this 60 million is important. I would say it probably needs to be higher as we go down the road, but it's a huge piece to the puzzle in the startup ecosystem that we need today.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wellman. Are there any questions from the committee? See none. Thank you very much for being here today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Ardinger, Brian Ardinger. I come here as a startup community builder, an angel investor, and as director of innovation at Nelnet, where I serve on a team that invests in early stage startups as part of our corporate venture fund.
We at Nelnet support LB 633 for a number of different reasons. One, we believe strongly that a strong, robust startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem helps not only the startups and the new companies that are being created, but larger corporations as well. First, I'll give you a little bit of background. So about 10 years ago, I started the NMotion Accelerator as a way to kind of accelerate this idea of how do we create new companies here in Nebraska. When I started about 10 years ago, I think Nebraska ranked maybe last or near the bottom of venture capital, right, maybe above Puerto Rico and Mississippi. Now we've gone quite a ways, but we're still probably middle of the pack. So there's still a long way to go. And the competition has gone faster as well. So companies or states like Indiana and Wisconsin and Ohio and that have upped the game as well. Now through that particular process of creating NMotion, we were able to accelerate and fund early stage startup companies. The first fund, we had companies like Quantified Ag and Live By, Noble, Breeze, Realm 5 that were created from that and have since gone on either exited and or created more jobs for the community. In fact, over the last 10 years of NMotion, I don't run it anymore, Scott Henderson does, and he can talk more about it. But over that 10 years, we've had, I believe, 77 companies that have come through that program. 23 of those have gone on to raise an additional $22 million in capital. So we know that we can do it in Nebraska. We just need to emphasize and get more people involved in this process. The benefits, obviously, to this particular bill is, we think from a corporate perspective, is having a robust entrepreneur ecosystem. It attracts talent to that ecosystem. People want to work on big, new, bold ideas. And we think that having companies that can be started and where young talent can come and work helps increase that as well. We think this particular program also will help us develop and double down on a couple different industry clusters. Well, right now, if you are trying as a startup to get funded, there's only a few sources. If you go to Nebraska Angels and you're not in the right sector, or there's nothing directly relatable, you may not get funded, and you may have to go to another state or some other place to find that funding. Where this will allow more funds to be created, specifically focused with more specialized networks, more capital focus on a particular segment, whether it's sports tech or ag tech or construction, DoD, manufacturing, et cetera. And then finally, I think this particular program will also enable ways for corporations to get more involved. So at Nelnet, we invest in individual startups. A lot of companies won't do that. If we have a fund of funds where corporations can get involved in investing in a fund, where they're diversifying their investment across different startups, and then also being more involved in just growing the ecosystem, serving on boards, mentoring, things like that. We think that's a very powerful statement. So we support LB 633 and open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ardinger. Got it. Any questions from the committee? Senator Ballard.
Thank you for being here. So when an entrepreneur comes, can you just kind of lay out what you're looking for? Are you looking for just a business plan? You're looking for an investment portfolio? What are you?
Yeah, so each investor will look at it differently, and it depends on where they are seeking that capital. So at the very earliest stages, you're looking for, what does that individual have or that team have as far as the skill sets, background, what have they done in the past? A lot of times the particular idea, is going to change and pivot because they have to figure that out in the marketplace. As that company grows and moves along and they're trying to raise additional capital, maybe for Series A or Series B, they've figured out some customers, are working on some things, and the metrics get a little bit more specific to what you would think of as normal business metrics versus early stage investing, where you're really looking at, do we think this team can execute on the idea, and do we think this is a possibility that this company and this market could turn into something very big?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello, my name is Scott Henderson, SCOTTHENDERSON. Thank you, Senator Slama and Senators on the Banking Committee. It's my first time on your committee, but last year was pretty active helping advocate for other bills like this. I'm excited to testify in support of LB 633 as the managing principal of NMotion Startup Accelerator, which is powered by Generator. You heard the story from Brian about NMotion, 10 years here in the state of Nebraska. And I can tell you this, that it's because of previous legislatures and governors working together to pass the Business Innovation Act. We have 10 years of a flywheel that's turning. It takes time to turn a flywheel. It's creaky and all. But if you looked at last year's Invest Nebraska report over the last 10 years, we have been able to help Nebraska companies collectively, because of the Business Innovation Act, generate $1 billion in outside investments. And that was $300 million just last year alone. So we are on a geometric curve of growth because of the years and years it takes to get this flywheel turning. I'm a native Nebraskan. I spent 20 years abroad, spending time in Atlanta, Boston, Indiana, working on national startup programs. And it takes decades. It's decades of investments. Silicon Valley is 75 years in the making. And it takes trillions of dollars of money because of federal programs to go through those things to make that happen. But in addition to the success that we've had, Brian had mentioned the 77 companies that the NMotion Accelerator. If you want some glossary terms, I'm happy to answer you in Q&A a little bit more about what is all these terms we throw at you here in the startup world. But basically, it's short amount of time. We put money into the company and we help connect these founders into with mentors and investors. Of the 77, 23 did raise additional funds of $22 million. And that created a lot of jobs, a lot of tax revenues to support programs, and a lot of wealth for the individuals involved with that. I'm part of Generator, which for the last 3 years has been operating NMotion. We were started about a year earlier than NMotion up in Madison and Milwaukee in Wisconsin. And since then have grown to 41 communities. We've helped over 1,000 startups either get started or accelerated, and helped raise an additional $1 billion of funding from private investors for those startups. We work in the states that have been mentioned, including state of Nebraska, state of North Dakota, and state of Illinois and state of Indiana, working with those fund of funds. The Husker Fund, in concept, in the parlance of investors, is a fund of funds where basically you're going to take money, put it in a big bucket, and then hire and basically chunk out parts of it to different people taking different approaches. So you're going to diversify your approaches, diversify your strategies. And the why $62.5 million? Why not? Because actually it's because it gets matched 1-for-1, if I understand correctly. Private sector will come forward just like it has with the Business Innovation Act, de-risking it by having the state help put the first half in. I know that corporations are looking to help because they understand great trees never grow alone. These big oak trees know that they need a strong, vibrant forest to continue to grow and succeed. And part of that great, strong forest is the startup community. You can tell the importance of this bill by seeing how many suit coats us startup people showed up wearing. But it is an exciting opportunity. Other states, this is table stakes now. A lot of what you're considering today in your committee meeting, there's table stakes. Other states are doing these things, and they're the ones that will stand out and will win these battles for talent. We lost 2 great entrepreneurs in the last year because there was a gap in the funds, the later stage funds, that the people that wrote the investment, that actually offered the investment, were out of state funds, and attracted the talent that we developed here in Nebraska with the early stage funding that we have. There was a gap post, and the requirement of their investment was that they had to move to Chicago. So we lost 2 individuals, Keith Fix and Taylor Monks, and the CEOs, 2 great growing companies that Nebraska incubated, and we lost. Husker Fund would help solve that. It would give us money at the later stage, and to what Manny was talking about at the earlier stage, because that's really the gap. The funding that we have here, the person with a great idea can get $250,000 of investment right off the bat, thanks to the Business Innovation Act and the Nebraska Prototype Grant. What we need is earlier money, and we need later money, and the Husker Fund will do that. Happy to answer any and all questions for you, but the last thing I leave with you is if you ever had to do community service for high school or whatnot, and you had to go help put a fish habitat in a reservoir, this is the basic idea. I mean, I was thinking, why was I putting all the cinder blocks in this big empty field that is now Zurinsky Lake? Is because you need substrate for that habitat. And that's what the Husker Fund is. It's a substrate that allows for very vibrant habitat to grow and thrive. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. Senator Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I guess I have one question with regard to through this funding. Is there any component of this that would be revolving in nature? In other words, you've talked about we put early seed money out there and then we lose somebody to Chicago, and we also talk about we have a lot of failures, but then we have those people that are successful, become very wealthy as a result of it. Do we get any of that money back in terms of to help? I mean, it seems to me we keep dumping money into programs, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just that you would hope that some of these that are successful that would not have been had they not gotten this seed money are bringing, either we get some piece of equity or something that allows us to get paid back and become self-funding as opposed to the legislature constantly recapitalizing.
Oh, yeah, great question. And it's good chance for some clarification. So, for example, in the Business Innovation Act, the allocations that the legislature gives that Invest Nebraska does then go invest. Any of the returns on investment that gets brought back to Invest Nebraska then is allows them to invest in other companies as well. I'll give you a good example. Quantified Ag, which Brian had mentioned, which came through InMotion, which was a Business Innovation Act recipient of some seed funds. While the exit is undisclosed because of the terms of agreement, Merck Animal Health Science bought it. Single largest return on investment in any InMotion company investment. The money that Invest Nebraska made off of that, the return on investment, they were able to then turn around and invest in 10 new companies that came through the InMotion Venture Studio. So there is an evergreen component to this that happens. And certainly as the manager of the fund, manager of the Husker Fund would allocate to the different groups, could put that in the stipulation of how they're doing it. I think it's great. I think we would love to have Husker Fund, better than no Husker Fund. The only tweak I would say is loosen the language of requiring this to be a company that manages this fund, be it Nebraska headquarters, because there's a tremendous amount of funds out there, other companies across the country. I'd open it up for bids and get the best and brightest people to manage the fund itself, to make sure things like that happen, that there is a accretive effect with the wins that happen, the windfall comes back into the ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Cow.
Thank you, Senator Salama. So is there a mechanism when these grants or investments are given to keep people in the state? Once they do become successful and they say, gosh, it's a lot warmer in Florida, I'm heading south. Is there a mechanism for either a certain time period or a certain amount of payback that they do actually stay in the state?
Now, as to the Husker Fund, how it would be operated, I'm not certain exactly what the plan would be, but I do know currently right now the funds that Invest Nebraska through the Business Innovation Act does have a requirement for a certain time period. But really, when don't see these as, I look at the investment side of things, and the investment side of things is you want the best return on that capital. And we want to have these companies stay here. But at the same time, if we've invested in them and we force them to do something that they can't, that will lead to their failure in the marketplace, it means that we will never see a return on investment. The way venture capital works is you only see profits. You only see a return on your investment as you write the check, when that company gets sold or merged into another company like Quantified Ag. In that moment, then that money gets pushed back to the folks who had ownership stakes in it. And most of those folks here in Nebraska. And so you see that people will start to bet back and put that money and put it back into the ecosystem. But you could, but I think you want to make sure return on investment happens.
Thank you, Senator Cow.
I do.
Senator Ballard, I could see it in your face.
You'll like this question, I think.
Oh, I bet I will.
Can you talk about some of the possibilities outside of Lincoln and Omaha for this program?
Oh, absolutely. So pandemic allowed us to experiment through the programs that we do. And InMotion, historically, an accelerator would require people to locate physically and all work in the same classroom. And for 12 weeks, you're doing work in the morning around concepts. In the afternoon, you're building your company by talking to customers. Well, now that we have Zoom and other video-based chat, we push almost all of our programming is done via Zoom. with our cohort members. And we've actually, in the last 2 years, have helped build companies in Grand Island and Kearney specifically. One of our shining stars is a guy named Dusty Burge, who's a Kearney kid, but Bankelman grew up in Bankelman, but went to Kearney. And he came through our program last year and raised $1 million in less than 6 months of additional capital. He set our high score so far in terms of the venture studio, and just is in the midst of raising another $2 million. And is located in Kearney, Nebraska, and he's building the company in Kearney, Nebraska. So yes, there's stuff just by population. There's, I kind of equate startups to kind of yeast. The yeast, you don't want to eat a loaf of yeast. You want a little yeast here and there, makes the bread. And you just find more of the crazy startups in higher population centers. But there are great programs in Grand Island, great in Hastings, in Kearney, North Platte, and Sydney, Norfolk. There are pockets of people out there, and our programs do reach those people.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Ballard. Any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Senator.
All righty. Any additional proponent testimony? Do we have any opposition testimony for LB 633? Seeing none, any neutral testimony for LB 633? All right.
Senator Slama, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Laurel Otken, spelled Laurel-Oetken, and I serve as the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation for the Greater Omaha Chamber. I'm here today to offer a neutral testimony for LB 633, and I know I'm the last one keeping you between the rest of your days, so I'll try to make this as brief as possible. We wanted to inform the committee of a few efforts that are happening in the innovation space, some of which are supported by the Nebraska Department of Economic Development and that really complement what has been introduced by this bill. Our organization is leading efforts to have stakeholders and representatives from Omaha and Lincoln within the government, corporate, university, and risk capital sectors, along with a number of startup founders and entrepreneurial support organizations, to participate in a program in partnership with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT as you more likely know it. It's called their Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, REAP for short. The program kicked off earlier this year in the summer, and we will formally conclude this program in November of this year. A small group of stakeholders within the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems will travel for a series of 4 workshops that take place on MIT's campus in Boston in one international location, which will actually be Western Australia this summer. The overarching goal of this program and its intended output is to produce a well-designed, thoughtful, action-oriented roadmap that includes a few quote-unquote must-win battles or key initiatives, as you may well know it, that best support innovation in our respective communities and answer the challenges that founders of high-growth, highly innovative companies are facing right now. Our participation also has the financial backing of the Kauffman Foundation based in Kansas City, Missouri, and is one of the largest grants that the state of Nebraska has received to date from this foundation. We're also joined by competitor cities in the heartland, such as Des Moines, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Additionally, this program and our participation is gaining Nebraska's innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems global recognition and awareness. There are a few other global counterparts that are participating in this with us. Our efforts have been supported by any Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and in November, Senator Justin Wayne actually joined us in one of our rotating positions to have a member of the legislature participate in the program. We would like to thank Senator McKinney for bringing forth this bill and for his efforts thus far in supporting innovation and the advancement of entrepreneurs across the state. As mentioned earlier, efforts in LB 633 are very complementary to the work that we're trying to accomplish through the MIT REAP program. We'd also like to offer that across the state and across the board, access to more venture capital is always valuable to founders, when managed responsibly, especially when not only in Nebraska, but across the country, there's not enough dollars going to support women-owned and minority-owned enterprises. As Scott mentioned, and something that I'd just like to highlight again, In 2021 alone, we saw 40 executed deals for startups in Nebraska, totaling to over $300 million in venture capital that was deployed across our state. This truly set the bar high in our state of Nebraska for what we can do as it relates to supporting startups at these high rates. We would love to see more funding and a great framework and structure partnered with that, whether that be through the Husker Fund or other funding mechanisms supported by the state. Lastly, we look forward to working more with Senator McKinney as this bill advances and want to make sure that when and if approved, this can be as successful as possible. I'm happy to take any questions if there's time permitted for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zuck. And are there any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for being here this afternoon. All right, any additional neutral testimony for LB 633? Seeing none, Senator McKinney, would you like to close? And as you approach, for the record, we have no letters for the record for LB 633.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone that came out today to testify. I think LB 633 is a much needed idea and concept for the state of Nebraska to grow our state in the startup and entrepreneurship space, not only in Omaha, but like in Scottsbluff, Kearney, wherever. My goal is to try to grow the state. I know I represent North Omaha, but I'm a Nebraskan, and I'll try to do whatever I can to try to grow the state. You mentioned OSBN. I think it wasn't successful. That one, capital, but two, I think they set up an incubator, but they didn't have supports behind it. Last year, my priority bill, the Innovation Hub Act, was passed, and we're hoping eventually, once we get through all this process, that we could have an innovation hub in North Omaha to help small businesses and entrepreneurs with growing and being innovative. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Are there any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, this closes out LB 633 and our hearings for today. Members, please stick around. We'll have a short